And there was many others that had exactly the same experience. They'd never been into the country, and it was wonderful to get away, see the country, meet the people, and enjoy their company. The tragic story of the 23rd Brigade has been put under wraps for years. For 50 odd years or 60 years now, we've been trying to get a bit more recognition because the 3 battalions that were in that, the 21st, the 22nd and the 2nd 40th, which was a Tasmanian battalion, and you know, it's just so long ago, and yet we get very little recognition. Very few people know of us. As you go around, they talk about, you know, Trawool, and they talk about the Kokoda Trail, and they talk about other things, but you very seldom hear anyone talk about Rebel, Ambon and Timor during the Second World War. But this is how things go. But when you have a look at things, the 23rd Brigade overall suffered the highest casualties of any brigade. But today, I'd like to talk to you about some of the boys that marched into Benalla 70 years ago. But before I do that, I only came out of hospital a couple of days ago, so I had to put all this together very quickly. But I can remember most of it, but that's why I've got my notes, so if you'd bear with me. We, the 2nd 22nd, left Trawool about 700 strong, and we marched through the various towns, stopping overnight where we had a beer, or we had a cup of tea, or we had a bit of a drink of coffee, and naturally we got a feed. So they were great days. Now our battalion band, who were all Salvation Army fellows, they didn't march. They got on a truck when we left Trawool, or the various stopping points, and they went on to the next town. And they relaxed during the day, and then they'd come out when we were about a mile out of town, and they'd line us all up, and we'd march into the various towns. And we were magnificent. Well, that's my opinion anyhow. And I've got something here you can have a look at over at the drill hall. It's a photo of our battalion marching into Benalla. And it's quite clear, and I've had it blown up. And there's a young boy standing there watching the parade come into Benalla. He's about 8 at the time, so you never know. Some of you older fellas in Benalla might have a look at it and say, gee, that was me 70 years ago. And on the side of the road, there's also some of the old cars. So you never know what you might recognise. But when we go to the drill hall, it'll be on display, so go and have a look at it. Now, the first man into Benalla in the march was Sergeant Bruce Perkins. Now, Bruce led the band in. He wasn't the band master, but he led the band in that day. Our band master was Sergeant Arthur Gullidge, who was a brilliant composer of band music. And when we marched through Melbourne, he said, gee, we can't march through Melbourne to Colonel Bogey, everybody knows that. So the night before, he got a lead pencil and a bit of paper, and he put one of the popular tunes of the day into band tempo. And we were the only unit that marched through Melbourne to one of the hits of the day in 1940, The Wizard of Oz. Now with Bruce, he escaped off the south coast of New Britain about 3 months after the Japs landed, so he got off and came back, and like most of us, he was in Heidelberg Hospital. We took up a couple of wards there, but then he went back to New Guinea and he joined the Papuan Infantry Battalion, and what happened was they were sent back onto New Britain, but it was in reverse this time. Instead of the Japs chasing us, we were chasing them. And Bruce, at the end of the war, he retired and he went back to his old job as a floor walker at Foy and Gibson's in Melbourne. Now the next one I've got on my list is Ted Best. Now I believe some of the people in here know of Ted Best. Ted Best was an officer who prior to the war was the top sprint runner in Australia. And after the Japs landed, he got down to a plantation with some of his fellows and they got a little pinnace boat there, and they took off down the island, hoping to escape. And they came into a place right down the end of the island called Gasmatter. But when they got there, the Japs were already there. So they grabbed Ted and the 12 men. And the Japs executed the 12 men. And they took Ted back for interrogation. He was then taken to Japan. He was a POW for 3 years. After the war, Ted became the Lord Mayor of Melbourne on 2 occasions. He was also a member of the Moonee Valley Racing Committee and also a member of the board of the Melbourne Metropolitan Board of Works. Unfortunately, Ted also passed away some years ago. There's not a lot more. I must tell you about one of my best mates. He's a chap by the name of Brian Hannigan. He was an amazing athlete and a brilliant scholar at St Pat's College at Ballarat. Before the war, in 1940, he entered for the stall gift, and he got a mark, I forget what the mark was now, but that was 7 yards, and he was running trials which would have won him the stall gift in 1940. But unfortunately, a few days before the gift, he tore a muscle in his leg, and that was it. So Brian then joined the army, and I first met him at Trawool, and he marched alongside me coming into Benalla here. I remember that clearly. So when we got to Albury, he was a bit of a larrikin, this Brian, and he said to me one day, Norm, he said, I've just been in and I've nominated to run in the Albury gift next week. So we knew Brian pretty well, so we raked up a couple of quid between about 3 or 4 of us, and we went in there, and Hannigan was 10-1. So we bonked our couple of quid on Hannigan at 10-1 for the final. Well, he won the heat, he won the semi-finals in the afternoon, and the final was to be run at night. And by this time, he was the red-hot favourite. You couldn't back him even. And what happened? About 5 inches, I'd say it was, from the finishing line, he did the same leg muscle. And a chap by the name of Ron McCann from the RAAF, he'd knocked him off right on the line. In Rebel, I saw him go into the canteen there, and if you can imagine the canteen, a wet canteen where there could be anything up to 500 blokes at any given time, all having a beer and talking, and Brian stood up there and sang a couple of songs, and you could have heard a pin drop. But on the day of the Japanese landing, Brian was with me, and we were getting strafed by the Japanese planes and goodness knows what. Anyhow, he got separated from us, and I never ever saw him again. Bill Harry. Bill Harry would be known to many of you people. He served the battalion well. He escaped off the south coast, and where he'd done a lot of sterling work. He went back to New Guinea, and again he was a brilliant soldier, Bill Harry. After the war, he worked on soldier settlement blocks, and he moved around all the country areas. He knew every area of Victoria, and he was a great bloke. He was also the National Treasurer of the RSL, the National Secretary of the Victorian RSL. He was our Honorary Secretary for 50 years, and he did all those jobs for 50 years. Unfortunately, Bill, now in his 90s, would have loved to have been here today, but he's a very sick man, and he's in poor health, and he's lost his memory completely. He doesn't know who he is, who his family is, or anything else. And finally, Alec Williams. Now, Alec Williams was a private in C Company, a good soldier, and we found out he was also a good boxer because he won we had boxing championships on the boat going away, and he did well in those, and up in Rebel there wasn't much to do, so they used to hold boxing championships, and he acquitted himself very well. After he escaped off the island and then went back again and served with the 2nd 4th Battalion up in around the Wewak area. after the war, he worked for the Melbourne Sports Depot, and he was the top three-stringer of rackets. And when the top championships were on at Kooyong, the top players, if they busted a racket, they never sent it anywhere but to Alec Williams in at Melbourne Sports Depot to get restrung. Because most of them in those days, the tennis stars, had one or two rackets, not a box full like they have today. But he was a great bloke, and he's also passed on. I hope you've been interested in hearing a little of the men of the 2nd 22nd. I know so many stories about them. I might add that when we finally reached Bonegilla from here, they decided we all should have a medical to see how we fared. And as a result of that, there was over 100 boarded out, and they were mainly with flat feet, breathing problems, and one fellow they found only he had a glass eye. How he ever got to it in the first place, I don't know, but they were boarded out. And just to finish off, we have with us today two of my good mates here. Next to me here is Fred Kollmorgen, and he was the only one of our Salvation Army band that escaped from rebel. And next to him again is Sam Blavey. Now Sam Blavey was a sergeant with our battalion, and a good soldier too, a good soldier. And he went back up to New Guinea when he got fit enough again, and he served with distinction with the 2nd 4th Battalion. As at today, there's only about 6 men of the 2nd 22nd that are mobile in any way at all. And out of the total force of 1,400 that were in rebel when the Japs landed, as at today, there's 17 of us still alive. It's been wonderful to be here, and many thanks for your very good welcome. Thank you very much.
Wasn't a bad comeback for a fellow that just come out of hospital and, as I say, needed to catch his breath as he came here. Now, Fred, are you up to saying a few words? Okay, Fred's going to do it sitting down, and I don't know how many of you know about Fred's story. I'm not sure whether he'll touch on it, but in reading his story as he left Rabaul and the way he left, just truly inspirational. Fred, oh, here he is. You're still in walking mode.
Thank you very, very much, and it is indeed a privilege to be here. Not only to have escaped the horrors of warfare, but today. As you've heard before, the band were great sufferers. They, for the most part, they did, apart from the band, they did some medical work and stuff like that. I did not participate in that because I had already trained very much so as a soldier to fight and destroy the enemy when that popped up. I wasn't looking to shed blood, but I found myself in that position of fighting, not remedying wounds or things like that. But at any rate, I, without others, managed to get home. You see, the band fellows mostly were given medical work when they were playing. I did not join in so much there because I was already trained as a soldier to go into action.